My name is Alyssa Carter. I am 36. I work at Falcon Ridge as a civilian weapons technician on the AH-64 Apache. I speak in the first person because you should hear this the way it happened. Close, unfiltered, steady. The hangar tasted of hot metal and solvent when my brother walked in with 2 junior officers trailing him like shadows. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. Apache's machine gun cleaner? My sister, the Carter hero. This is what you've become? The room burst into laughter. Wrenches clicked. A socket rolled off a bench and rattled across the grated floor. I kept my eyes on the M230 chain gun. My hands moved with the slow certainty of habit. Oil traced half-moons across my gloves. I did not react. I had learned that lesson the hard way. A rectangle of desert light stretched across the floor when Major Daniel Rains, lead Apache pilot, stepped in from the flight line. He did not speak at first, his attention fixed to the left chest of my flight suit, where a corner of a small black patch had slipped free. He walked to the front. The laughter thinned. Tools went quiet, as if someone had unplugged the building. He planted his boots, lifted his hand, and the hangar went silent. "Ma'am," he said, his voice filled with awe. "That patch, you are a living legend?" Ethan froze. The grin slid off his face like paint and rain. I looked up. Not triumphant, not ashamed, only clear. Name-calling is easy. Maintenance is harder. I set the barrel aside and let his question sit. The way you let a rotor spool down after a hard flight. People stared as if the patch could speak for me. It could, it had, and it would again. Because patches are not decoration where I come from. They are shorthand for debts paid in full. A year earlier at my father's memorial service, my phone buzzed under the program booklet. A single text from my husband lit the screen. "Don't react. Your sister is recording you." I kept smiling. I looked slowly along the pews. I breathed in the smell of lilies and wood polish. Then I texted back one code word we had agreed on long ago. Raven. 10 seconds later, his entire SEAL team, disguised as guests in dark suits and modest dresses, stood up together. What happened next made her regret every staged whisper, every trap, every performance she tried to force on my grief. Grief taught me something that day. Do not perform, do not flinch. Act when it counts. I filed that truth beside others carved by sand and fire. That discipline held now. Rains's salute hung in the air like a raised gate, an invitation to step through. I did not yet. I wiped my hands, folded the cloth, checked the feed system one last time, and let the room decide who I was while I decided what came next. The desert wind pressed at the doors, the Apache outside clicked as its metal cooled, and the taste of solvent lingered like a memory I could choose to keep or rinse away. I stood. I breathed. I let the silence work. The first voice to break was not Ethan's. It was a young airman near the tool crib, whispering to no one in particular. Rains lowered his hand. I kept my seat on the rolling stool. I set the firing pin on a lint-free cloth. "Legends are just soldiers who survive the impossible," I said, my tone flat as a rangefinder. Soldiers survive by paying attention to the small things. The small things were all around us. A worn torque wrench, a missing cotter pin, a safety tag half tucked under an aluminum tray. Ethan cleared his throat as if he could swallow the last 2 minutes. He could not. The room understood the change, even if no one wanted to admit it. The patch had done its work. It flipped the polarity of the space. Ridicule turned to attention, noise to listening. I kept my movements economical, one part to solvent, another to air, reassembly in the order muscle memory prefers. The steel felt warm. The chain links clinked. Oil scented the air. My mind walked back to Hellman because Ethan's jab had aimed there. At the shot people said should not have happened. A dust wall ran at us like a living thing that day. Range 2.7 miles. A pickup with a mounted gun. Friendly calls were pinned in a dry riverbed. The transmission crackled. Fear and discipline lived in the same voice. I remember the wind, the grit, the calculation done twice, because the numbers felt like a dare. I squeezed, counted, waited, and the radio answered with one word that broke and steadied at once. Hit. No cheering, just breathing, then moving to the next task. That is how survival works. That is how reputations get made, whether you want them or not. In the hangar, Ethan studied me, eyes tight, jaw set, a man realizing the ground had shifted while he decorated the air with jokes. He tried to grin. It read as pain. The two lieutenants beside him straightened. The culture of the room turned and faced forward. Rains stepped closer. His voice dropped for my ears only. We should speak after this. Off the floor. We will, I said, and set the pin back into place with a click that sounded louder than it should. The young airman asked what everyone was thinking. Is the impossible shot real? Like, real? Real enough to give me gray hair before I earned it, I said, and let a thin smile show for the fact that 40 people went home. Outside, 2 Apaches taxied. Rotor wash shook the doors. Heat shimmered over concrete. A supervisor shouted a checklist. Conversations restarted. Work reasserted itself after the hush. I lifted the barrel, accepted a fresh cloth from a kid who would not meet my eyes, and felt the room adapt to a new gravity it could not name. Silence is a tool. Respect a byproduct. Focus the habit you keep when people watch for you to slip. I did not plan to slip. I planned to finish the job, then meet Rains, then decide how far to open the door I had just unlocked. The next move mattered. I would choose it. With care today. Deliberately. Ethan pushed through the door first. His shoulder clipped the frame. Metal rang. His stride snapped short when he realized everyone had stepped aside without being told. I watched him go. I did not chase. I did not soothe. I let him keep his pace because that was the only control he could find. The remaining officers pretended to check inventories. A ratchet turned without pressure. A clipboard hovered over a blank page. Major Rains stayed where he was, then closed the distance by 2 quiet steps. We should talk, he said, not a command, an offer. After shift, I answered, away from ears, near the flight line. He nodded once, then softened his tone. Is the exposure what you wanted? It is what I allowed, I said. A signal, not a speech. The patch had not slipped by accident. The corner had been tucked and untucked with a purpose when I bent to free the feeder assembly. Thunderbolt taught me to hide truth in routine, to make the unusual look like habit, to let the world tell itself the story I needed told. Rains knew that school. He wore it in how he watched doorways, in how he kept one shoulder clear for motion. He did not ask more, not yet. He glanced toward the far wall where a faded photo of an Apache crew hung beside a safety poster. You still fly in your head, he said. Every hour, I answered. The ache had a name I did not speak. It belonged to people who taught me to measure wind with a wrist, to count by breath, to decide by principle when panic asked for speed. A gust hit the hangar doors. A sliver of sun cut across the floor and into the open receiver. I slid the cover plate home, seated the pins, and handed the logbook to the supervisor with a signature that said, finished for now. Rains waited while I cleaned the bench. He respected the ritual. You do not hurry a person who's putting tools back in order. In the corridor, the noise of the hangar fell behind us like surf. The hallway smelled of dust and coffee. A bulletin board listed duty rosters. A photograph showed last month's fun run. Life insisted on itself even when secrets moved through it like currents. Halfway down the hall, a young mechanic paused, then gave me a small nod he did not seem to understand giving. I nodded back. Simple. The acknowledgement soldiers trade when something unspoken has been seen. At the door to the flight line, Rains paused. You know Thunderbolt still watches, he said. So do I answered. He studied me, then looked toward the hangar where Ethan's echo lingered. Family complicates math, he said. Family always does, I said, and put on my cap. We stepped outside. The wash from a taxiing Apache tugged at our sleeves. The sky burned over the mountains. The day moved forward, so would we, and the conversation waiting on the far side of the tarmac would decide how loud the next hour needed to be. The corridor to Colonel Whitaker's office was quieter than the hangar, but not by much. The hum of HVAC mixed with the muted whine of a forklift in the supply bay down the hall. Rains walked half a step behind me, neither rushing nor lingering. We reached the end of the corridor, and he knocked twice before opening the door. Whitaker's office was dim. The blinds were drawn against the desert glare, and a single desk lamp cast a pool of light across the papers in front of him. He gestured us in without standing. I stepped inside, noting the smell of strong coffee and the faint trace of machine oil that clings to every building on base. Rains closed the door behind us, the latch clicking into place. Whitaker didn't look up right away. Instead, he opened a brown folder stamped with the familiar red diagonal. Restricted. "Carter," he said at last, eyes scanning the page. "Distinguished Flying Cross, multiple combat tours, commendations from 2 commands I can't even name in this room. Why is someone like you cleaning guns?" I drew a slow breath, letting the question hang just long enough to measure the space between curiosity and suspicion. "I'm here under OSI coordination," I said. "We suspect a breach in Hawkeye targeting system data. Falcon Ridge is a transit point for the upgrades." Whitaker's gaze sharpened, his fingers tapped once on the desk. He didn't speak, so I continued. "This position gives me access to the system interface during scheduled maintenance. It also keeps me invisible. No one suspects the gun cleaner." That last line held in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Rains shifted slightly in his chair, his hands resting on his thighs. Whitaker leaned back, studying me as if trying to decide whether my presence was a shield or a knife. "I've heard whispers about Hawkeye," he said finally. "New encryption layers, integrated threat recognition, remote targeting protocols. All of it classified at a level that makes people disappear if they talk too much. You're telling me someone here is moving that data?" "I'm telling you the data is moving," I replied. "And every trail I've traced in the last 18 months points back here. This base isn't the origin, but it's part of the pipeline. Someone is laundering access through scheduled weapons service, exploiting the upgrade logs." Whitaker's jaw tightened. "You have names?" "Not yet," I said. "I have patterns, timestamps, serials that don't match, requisition forms with signatures I know are forged. But no single piece is enough. I need time and continued access to pull the threads together." He closed the folder, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "And your brother?" I kept my expression still. "I didn't ask for this assignment because of him. But I'm not blind to the complications." For a moment, the only sound was the rattle of the blinds as a gust hit the window. Whitaker finally nodded once. "Continue your work. You'll have what you need. But if you're right, Carter, you understand what this means." "I do," I said. And I did. It meant that when the breach was exposed, it wouldn't just be the base under scrutiny. It would be everyone who had ever signed off on a piece of this operation, including people in that room. Rains met my eyes briefly, a silent confirmation that the next moves would have to be precise. Whitaker opened another folder, signaling the meeting was over, but not the conversation. The hall outside Whitaker's office felt colder than the room we had left. Cool air hummed through the vents. Fluorescent light flattened every surface. I walked with Rains to the stairwell. We split at the landing. He turned for the flight line while I turned inward, to the place the job lives when no one is watching. 18 months earlier, a message woke me before sunrise. A logistics officer I trusted sent 3 photographs and 1 line of text. "Hawkeye container missing. Yemen contact claims custody." The photos showed a steel box with our stencils half scraped away. A desert yard, armed men with scarves pulled high against the wind. I dressed without turning on the lamp. The room felt like the inside of a flight helmet. The world narrowed to numbers and routes. Hawkeye was not a single device. It was a family of upgrades. Sensor fusion, encryption, targeting logic that learns. A nervous system we only installed on aircraft we would trust with our lives. Losing a prototype was not a clerical error. It was a fault line. I called the duty agent and asked for shipping records, serial logs, satellite tracks, and yard cameras from every handoff. Within an hour, a pattern surfaced. A quick transfer in Djibouti, a routing code that did not belong, a truck that left the port yard and never pinged another reader. The Yemen footage came from a source who usually sold rumors for small money. This time the images were too clean. The angles too convenient. Someone wanted us to see just enough. When we stripped the metadata, the trail bent back toward our side of the ocean. A staging node that touched Falcon Ridge, my brother's base. I did not speak his name. I did not need to. Blood ties distort angles. Good investigators name the distortion and keep working. I requested 2 conditions from OSI. First, A wall around the inquiry so narrow that only 3 people could touch it without burning their fingers. Second, permission to disappear in plain sight as a civilian. The agent measured me for a long breath, then asked whether I understood the cost. I did. No wings, no call sign, no place in the squadron photo. Contractor badge, tool chest. Long hours nobody logged because nobody believed they mattered. I signed the forms and completed recertifications that justified my access to the bays. Electrical, hydraulic, weapons. The quiet corners where people let their guard down because maintenance feels like background noise. Paperwork became my camouflage, routine my cover, patience my weapon. When the transfer cleared, I drove through the Falcon Ridge gate with a plastic bin of tools and a sentence I repeated until it felt like bone. Keep your profile small. Keep your eyes open. I knew I would cross paths with Ethan. I knew he would not welcome me. What I did not know yet was how the missing container had walked, who had signed the papers that let it grow legs, which of our safeguards had been turned into stepping stones. I began where any good mechanic begins, with the small things. Screws that did not match, timestamps that drifted, signatures that felt wrong, quiet questions at coffee, a map forming. Whitaker nodded and waved me back to work. The signal felt clean, a lane opening on a crowded highway. In the doorway, Rains shifted his shoulder to screen us from the corridor and kept his voice low. I'll cover for you if needed, but be careful. Leaks like this, they get people killed. I did not blink. Already have. The answer left my mouth before I shaped it. Words that had waited under my tongue since Helmand. The picture rose with its usual speed. A Thunderbolt teammate dropping to one knee, his hand pressing the patch on his chest as if he could hold the bleeding in place. Scarlet slicking black thread, heat thinning the air. We trained to move past images like that, to execute, to live. Training worked, memory persisted. The motif stays because it tells the truth. Badges are not costume, they are ledger entries. Red ink balanced by breath. I steadied my pace back to the corridor, not fast, not slow, the walk of someone who belonged. The base sounded different after meetings like that. The same machines, a sharper edge. I signed out of visitor control, cut through a maintenance bay where a crew chief cursed a stuck panel, and returned to Apache 319. My bench waited like an old friend. Undramatic, ready. The logbook lay open where I had left it. I wrote 2 lines in the block letters I learned in flight school, then reset my tools by size and weight. Then checked the parts cradle for anything that did not belong. Rains joined me 5 minutes later, no hurry, no theater. We stood with our backs to the airframe, 2 people looking at a machine. Your access runs as long as I can keep the noise down, he said. If someone starts asking the wrong questions, I will get you clear. I nodded, gratitude measured small. I set a watch on the Hawkeye interface, I said. Whenever a configuration file changes outside the window, I get a silent ping. The pings cluster near shift change and Sunday nights. Somebody likes routine and darkness. He exhaled once. Lazy rhythms, or practiced ones. We will learn which, I said. I returned the side plate to its rack, wiped the bench, and slipped a coded note card into the drawer that only my badge could open. Once a week, OSI collected those cards from a dead drop in the calibration room. A metal box labeled with a serial that matched nothing. Real paper felt old-fashioned. Paper still beats panic when networks turn strange. Before chow, I took the long way past supply, counting footsteps, counting faces, stacking the day's small oddities where my mind could reach them. At the corner by the tool cage, I saw Ethan waiting, arms folded, eyes bright with a shine that was not joy. He watched me approach, said nothing, then smiled the way a blade smiles under fluorescent light. I stopped at a courteous distance, hands loose, voice calm. The next words would push us into open conflict. I could feel the floor tilt. I allowed the tilt. Ethan stepped from the shadow of the tool cage and blocked the corridor. He had chosen a blind corner. No cameras, no foot traffic. You think you're special because of that shot. You cost me my promotion. Now you're sniffing around my base? His voice carried an edge, bright, brittle. I kept my hands loose and my breathing slow. Your base? Or the Air Force's? He laughed without humor. Same thing. The sound bounced off cinder block and died fast. His eyes flicked past my shoulder. A quick check for witnesses, then back to my face. That glance told me more than words. A reflex of someone protecting heat. I did not step back. Distance is surrender when someone wants to push you into motion. I shifted half a boot to set my balance. Shoulder eased, chin level. Anger wanted the first punch. Discipline raised my guard. Memory kept my feet planted. I chose presence over pride, breath over noise, right here. You want to talk about the promotion, I said. We can talk as adults. You failed a security procedure. I told the truth when asked. The board made its decision. You chose your record over family. I chose integrity over shortcuts. I let it sit. Then added a valve to keep it from sounding like a sermon. And I would choose it again. For you, for me, for anyone who straps into a bird and trusts the system to hold. He stepped closer, the smell of coffee and mint gum undercut by stress. Then hear this. Stay out of my lane. I am in my lane, I said. Maintenance, documentation, compliance. If your lane intersects, that is a design issue, not a personal one. His jaw worked. You think that patch makes you untouchable. That patch reminds me who paid for my breath, I said. It does not make me blind. For a beat we heard only a broom cart and the thunder of a departing Apache. He looked down the hall again, then leaned in, red near his eyes. You are not welcome here. I am not here for a welcome, I said. I am here to do my job. He smiled, thin, fast. You always were good at making it sound simple. Simple is not easy, I said. You know that. The air tightened. Childhood arguments rose, scraped knees, last slices, now in uniforms. If you have something to declare, do it on paper, I said. If you have something to hide, do not put me near it. He spread his hands as if to show he carried nothing, then let them fall. Watch yourself, Allie. I said, my voice quiet. The way you speak to a live wire. You should too. A pair of mechanics turned the corner. Conversation returned. The corridor sighed. He stepped aside without another word. I walked past. Steady pace, eyes forward. Every nerve recording. By the time I reached the bay, my hands were already back at work. But the map in my head had a new red mark where my brother had just stood. A warning, a promise, a place to watch until it moved or burned. Year of the audit, Ethan served as the officer in charge of weapons transport. Pallets, seals, custody forms, and drivers who aged 10 years in a month. A pallet went missing between the railhead and the airfield. Not a rifle or two. An entire crate that should have been photographed at each handoff. The investigation started quiet and turned loud. I was called in as a witness because I had signed the inbound inspection 3 days earlier. Under oath, I said what the checklist demanded. The cage door had been left on emergency bypass. The secondary lock bar was not thrown. The tamper tag showed a score line where someone had worked a blade under it. I did not speculate, I described. The board thanked me, then asked Ethan into the same chair. I waited in the hallway and listened to the clock punch each second into my ribs. He came out with color high in his face and a smile meant for killing. Later he said I had chosen career over blood. I told him truth is what keeps aircraft from falling out of the sky. He did not hear me. By the end of the quarter, he had lost the promotion. By the end of the year, he had learned how to turn every room into a jury. I was the defendant. He was both prosecutor and audience. We kept speaking, then only at holidays, then not at all. Memory does not travel alone. It brings smells and light with it. The day the auditors rechecked the cage, the floor smelled like brake cleaner. The afternoon sun cut through wire mesh and laid a grid over our boots. Ethan stood with his hands on his belt and watched a young sergeant reapply seals. The kid's hands shook. My brother laughed. I pulled him aside and said the laugh did not help. He said leadership did not whisper. I said leadership fixed locks. Months later, when our father's memorial brought us into the same pew, he would not look at me through the eulogy. I thought grief would bridge the gap. It did not. It deepened it. Back in the present, after the corridor standoff, I took the long way to the flight line. At the corner near the weather office, I stopped because my map said to stop. Ethan stood outside in the light with a man I did not recognize. The stranger wore a faded flight suit with an old unit patch that did not match our rotation. No name tape. A mismatched Velcro rectangle where a badge should have been. Boots that belonged to a maintenance bay, not to the line. He kept his shoulders turned so passing personnel would see only his profile. Ethan leaned in. Their hands never touched. Their eyes did. I marked height, gait, the way the man favored his left knee, the cadence of 2 short nods before he walked away. I checked the roster when I reached my bench. No one fit. I wrote the details on a narrow card, folded it once, slid it into the calibration drop, then went back to the M230, small parts, clean edges, steady breath, the work that looks like background until the lights come on. I kept watching the doorway for his return. Night shift is when the base tells the truth. Machines breathe louder, people speak softer. I signed into the maintenance camera console with my contractor badge. The grid came alive. 12 feeds, grainy but honest. Bay 1 held a ladder against an empty pylon. Bay 2 framed my bench. The tool cage lens stared through wire. I rolled the timeline back 3 hours, then forward in 10-minute steps, then frame by frame through minutes that look harmless. At 21:30, a shadow crossed the far door of the cage. Ethan entered, cap low, shoulders tight. The man from the afternoon followed 1 breath later. Same faded flight suit, no name tape, gait favoring the left knee. They paused in the blind wedge where one camera yields to another, practiced. I switched angles. Camera 12 caught an elbow. Camera 9 showed half a profile. Camera 3 near the shop sink held the clean shot. Ethan lifted a small black drive. The stranger checked the corridor, then cupped his hand over Ethan's like a man taking communion. The pass lasted less than a breath. A move that would look like talk to anyone not watching. My stomach tightened, pain and confirmation at once. This was not only a mission, this was family. The drive rode on my brother's hand, the way a stone rides a sling. I rewound and played it again with the volume up. The tiny click of plastic on skin spoke louder than any confession. I printed stills to the secure calibrator, wrote the timestamps in block letters, slid them into an envelope for audit. I saved the clip to a clean drive, logged access under a routine quality check. Dull words to protect sharp truths. The room drew in. Memory rose with a fist. Helmand, a teammate dropping to one knee, his hand pressed to a patch darkening under blood. I set my hands on the desk, let the wave pass, then returned to what the moment demands. I drafted a message for the duty agent and did not send it. Leverage first, confrontation second. I opened the OSI binder to the beacon protocol, read the checklist once, closed the cover. I would not act angry. I would act ready. For a minute, I pictured walking to Ethan's quarters, knocking, asking when he forgot the oath we both signed. The picture burned out. Noise without leverage is a gift to the other side. I shut down the console, locked the drawer, checked the bay doors, counted clicks. The hallway waited empty except for a vending machine humming like a tired generator. The base at night sounds like a plane at idle, intent stored. I turned toward the exit and felt the map in my head redraw itself. The next line would be a trap, not a fight. I would set bait in daylight, let routine carry it, then follow the current to the source. Family complicates math. Integrity solves it. I walked into the cool hour before midnight and let the desert wind dry the oil from my gloves. The decision made, the work begun now. I did not send the clip to OSI, not yet. Leverage first, confrontation second. I walked to the far end of the hangar where the signal holds and dialed the one number I keep memorized under pressure. Carter, a voice said. Dry. Alert. Still thunderbolt in every syllable. Rook, I answered. The only call sign I still allow. I delivered the headline in 3 simple lines. Falcon Ridge, a missing Hawkeye link, my brother's handoff to an unlisted pilot. Rook did not waste breath. He asked for the end state. I said I wanted a net, not a single fish. A map of every hand that touched the pipeline. He exhaled once, approval disguised as air. then told me to design a decoy that would look boring to anyone who did not know where to stare. We built the plan over a secure channel and a double-keyed line, a passive tracker paired to a honey token file that mimics Hawkeye configs. Open the file, the beacon wakes, the metadata sings back with time and path. Rook owned the cryptographic side. I owned the delivery theater, the rhythms and paperwork that would make the bait feel routine. We drafted a narrow chain of custody that would survive a glance, a calibration ticket, a service note, an innocuous routing stamp. The decoy needed familiar fingerprints. I printed a work order in Ethan's section, not his name, his lane, plausible enough that a distracted clerk would wave it through without slowing his hand. The journey would not be secret. It would be boring. A manila pouch routed through calibration, then to the tool cage, then to a flight locker near the weather office. Boredom is camouflage. People relax when a package yawns. I scheduled each hop to coincide with shift change, the hour when attention loosens and small thefts learn to walk. At dawn, I briefed Rains in 5 lines he could deny. I will move a decoy through normal channels. I expect someone to touch it. I will call you when they do. He did not ask who. He asked what posture to hold. Eyes in time, I said. He nodded and walked out like any other morning. I assembled the drive at my bench. Gloves on. Checklist open. The file tree built to look convincingly messy. Half the folders were empty. The rest held notes with timestamps that matched our real service windows. The beacon slept under a text file with a dull name, schematic notes. When opened, it would ping a relay and light a corridor on Rook's screen. I sealed the pouch, stamped the routing code, set it in the outgoing bin, logged it as routine. I returned to the M230 and let work bleed the scene of drama. Steel, solvent, and torque pulled me back to the habit that keeps hands steady when nerves want. Headlines. Then I waited. Work without watching the clock. Hands on the gun, ears on the room. Midday, the pouch walked. A clerk signed it through. The camera caught the motion. Habit moved the package forward. My phone buzzed once. Rook's message read alive, then went dark by design. By shift change, the pouch reached the weather locker. The next touch would be greed. Ethan did not know I was watching. He did not know the weather locker he circled was bait. The pouch sat on the middle shelf between tie-down straps and desiccant packs. Quiet, ordinary, patient. I stood across the corridor with a clipboard and a neutral face. To anyone passing, I was logging serials. The beacon would sleep until the right hands woke it. Timing mattered. Angles mattered. Breath mattered. Impossible shot once meant wind, range, and a moving truck in a sandstorm. Now it meant one clean decision at the farthest emotional distance 2 siblings can endure. I had one chance to hit without shattering what remained of blood. Shift change turned the hallway into a river. Clerks drifted. Weather techs traded jokes. A crew chief hustled past. Ethan arrived late, composed the way a person becomes when he rehearses normal. He paused at the drinking fountain, checked his watch, and let the flow of bodies carry him toward the locker. I watched without staring. Staring spooks. Stillness invites. He leaned into small talk with a logistics sergeant, laughed once, then drifted 2 steps left as if the locker had moved to meet him. My pulse did not spike. Training kept it level. I let my breathing set the tempo today. The metronome in my head clicked 3 counts. Count, breathe, commit. His fingers touched the pouch. My phone thumped once in my pocket. Rook's relay flashed a single word. Alive. I did not move. Ethan did. He eased the pouch free, weighed it with a thumb, and slid it into a folder that matched his duty binder. He closed the locker, smiled at nothing, and walked away with the gait of a man pleased by routine that continues to obey him. I let 2 people pass before I followed. At the corner mirror, I read the hallway like a map. Distances, lines of sight, exits, friendly eyes who would not remember me. I adjusted the clipboard and kept a pace that looked like work. He turned toward the old avionics bay, a corridor with one camera out for repair and another pointed a degree too high. The beacon stitched each hop to Rook's screen. I did not need to see Ethan's hand to know the route. I only needed to stay in step without throwing a shadow that did not belong. Impossible shot beat steady in my chest. Patience over speed, clarity over noise. At the bay door, he checked a text and hesitated. 2 men exited with coffee. He held the door with an easy smile, then slipped inside. I looped past the supply closet and entered through the far side. The room smelled like dust and old sealant. A rolling cart blocked most of the view. I caught a sliver of Ethan's sleeve and an unfamiliar patch on the arm of a second man. My phone pulsed again. The beacon hopped to a new relay. Outbound. I exhaled once. This was the shot formed by distance and time. I did not call OSI. I turned back to the hallway and let them leave without meeting my eyes. The map had updated. The current moved. The next moment to aim would come if I held steady. Night made the base honest. Floodlights painted hard edges. Shadows kept their shape. We staged the handoff at the disused cargo bay behind the weather office. The place newcomer forgets because nothing important is supposed to happen there. OSI teams arrived in unmarked vans before sunset. They split into pairs. Badges tucked. Radios on whisper. Rook stayed on the encrypted line. His screen mirrored the beacon's path. Each hop pulsed like heartbeat. I carried the decoy in a courier pouch. Same manila, same worn stamp, nothing to notice. At 19:30, I signed it into the bay log. The clerk never looked up. Ethan arrived at 1948 with the unlisted pilot. Man peeled off a truck and checked perimeter with a flashlight he never turned on. It was choreography, not improvisation, practiced enough to feel boring. That was our advantage. I placed the pouch on the table, stepped back, and began a maintenance checklist that required facing away from the door. The pilot took the pouch, opened it, and connected the drive to a laptop. Rook's whisper came through my earpiece. Awake. The honey token file launched. The relay sang. Every route and node lit up for OSI like runway lights in fog. The pilot nodded once to Ethan, then reached for his phone. That was the cue. 2 OSI agents flowed in from side bay. 2 more from roll-up door. The sound in the room changed from private to official. Federal agents, hands where we can see them. No shouting, just certainty. The pilot froze. Ethan flinched. The third man raised his hands and earned a wrist lock that put him on the floor without drama. Zip ties clicked. Phones and drives went into evidence bags. The laptop screen blinked and died when Rook cut the session. Ethan looked at me. Not surprise, not rage. Something older, the look a person gives a mirror when the story collapses. He said my name once, not loud. I did not answer. A supervisor read him his rights. OSI separated the detainees. A van door slid shut. The metal sounded final. Outside, the air smelled like rain that would not arrive. Desert weather playing at mercy. Rook called to confirm the outer net had closed. 2 pickups at the highway spur. 1 courier at the fuel farm, all in custody. OSI would take it from there. Indictments, warrants, long paperwork nights. The job had run like a checklist. Clean, contained, decisive. I was not happy. I was tired. Tired in the bones. Tired in the way silence gets heavy after you hold it too long. I walked the perimeter once, touched the chain link, watched a distant Apache lift and nose east. Rains found me by the stairwell and offered water. Took it, grateful. Good work, he said. I shook my head. Necessary work, I said. He understood. Family had become evidence. Evidence had become chains. Justice would be a process now. I turned in my badge for the night, signed the log, and carried the empty pouch back to the bench where the M230 waited. Honest, uncomplicated. A machine that does exactly what you ask and nothing else. The interrogation room held the stillness of a hangar after shutdown. Fluorescent light hummed. A digital recorder blinked red on the metal table. 2 OSI agents sat across from Ethan. A third stood by the wall with a clipboard. His pen clicked once and then went quiet. Through the one-way glass, I watched the opening moves. Shipping schedules filled the screen. Columns of dates and tail numbers. Custody lines that should have been straight and were not. Rain stood an arm's length to my right. They started with the drive, the decoy that was no longer a decoy. Directories opened, hash values verified. The honey token's beacon path drew itself like a flight plan across a map. Yemen Yard, Djibouti transfer, Falcon Ridge routing node. The arrow returned to our door with the stubborn certainty of a compass. Contracts followed. Shell companies layered like paint. Obsidian vector in the center. Invoices for consulting without deliverables. Then the encrypted message logs. Timestamps matching shift changes. Short bursts that traced the same loop as the pouch. Ethan did not ask for counsel at first. He watched his own reflection more than the agent's. The glass gave him a ghost to argue with. When he finally lifted his eyes, he looked straight at me. There is no rule against facing a mirror the way you face a person. I kept my posture square. I did not turn away. I let him see the steadiness he used to rely on. Not anger, not pity. Only the line I hold when the mission is louder than the room. Family sat between us. The lead agent laid photographs on the table, the pass in the tool cage, the meeting near the weather office, the night exchange when the laptop woke and told on itself. He asked Ethan to explain the custody gaps, to name the man with the mismatched Velcro, to account for payments routed through a charity account that never bought a single blanket. Ethan spoke carefully. He said the old audit had punished him unfairly. He said he was rebuilding trust. He said he believed the contractor was legitimate. The agent slid bank records forward. Deposits and withdrawals formed a map anyone could read. Rains did not move, neither did I. Helmond rose in the glass. A teammate pressed his palm to his patch and left a red print there. The ledger, no one escapes. Integrity keeps aircraft flying. Integrity also keeps families from lying to themselves. I repeated it as cadence so judgment would not outrun duty. The case agent asked one more question. Whether Ethan understood the rights he had been read. Whether he would continue without counsel. He nodded once, then shook his head, then asked for an attorney. The agents paused the recorder. Paperwork slid across the table. The air conditioner kicked on with a soft shudder. Ethan looked once more at the glass. I let every year we shared rest in my eyes. Bikes and summers. Arguments and winters. The day at our father's memorial when I stayed composed and chose the code word. This was not vengeance. It was gravity. Evidence has mass. It lands where it must. The recorder light went dark. The door opened. And I stood a little straighter, ready for the next weight to drop. The recorder light went dark. The door clicked. The hallway smelled like dust and copier toner. We stepped out to find an OSI captain waiting with a folder. He did not lower his voice. Whitaker stood to his left. Rains set his shoulders to neutral. Without Carter, we wouldn't have found the leak. The sentence carried farther than he intended. A young technician at the printer paused mid-stapler. A second later, his eyes met mine, then dropped. Rumor moves faster than trucks. By chow, the story had shape. By evening, it had judgments attached. At one table, I heard, "She turned in her own brother." At the next, "She saved Cruz? Sit down." Trays scraped. Opinions clattered. No one looked at me directly. Everyone adjusted their volume 2 notches down when I passed. I carried my coffee. I sat at the end and read the maintenance log, like it was a novel worth finishing. Back in the bay, a folded note waited on my bench. 3 words in block letters, "For the Cruz." I slid the note under the mat, then signed out a new torque wrench. Someone had penciled a single word on the whiteboard by the tool cage, "Rat." I erased it without ceremony, wrote "safety check due at 1600, and returned to work. The M230 does not care about gossip. It cares about tolerances, feet alignment, spring tension, details that keep pilots alive whether they like you or not. Rains arrived with hesitation. Enough to check the room, not enough to read as fear. "That line in the hall will echo," he said. "Let it." I set a pin and wiped solvent from my glove. "People will pick a side before they pick a fact." He nodded, then added, "You have my side, facts included." He left it there, the gift of a sentence that could stand a storm. Whitaker called me to his office for 10 precise minutes. He did not apologize for the captain's volume. He did not need to. "You will limit contact with potential witnesses, including your brother," he said. "Let OSI handle the lanes that are theirs." "Understood," I said. He studied me as if measuring whether the order also had to reach my heart. It did not. The order was already inside me. Discipline over relief, process over heat. The young technician found me near the parts wash that night. Nervous, earnest, words tripping over each other. I heard what the captain said. I told 2 people. Now it is everywhere. I held his gaze so he would not drown in. Apology. You heard 1 sentence, not the weight behind it, I said. When a system works, nobody claps. When it fails, nobody forgets who could have fixed it. Learn from that, then get back to work. His shoulders dropped. He exhaled. He nodded. By lights out, the base had chosen 3 versions of me: traitor, guardian, ghost. I chose 1 version of myself, the mechanic who tells the truth and signs the work, the sister who will not lie to keep a story pretty. The night settled. The rumor kept walking, and I laid out tools for morning, calm as a runway before dawn quietly. Military police escorted Ethan down the corridor, 2 on his flanks and 1 at his back, boots striking a slow drum against the tile. The OSI captain walked ahead with the evidence bag. The black drive lay inside like a small stone that could sink a ship. Rains stood clear of the path. Whitaker held the door and said nothing. I stepped from the shadow of the vending alcove and matched their pace for 3 strides. Stop, the captain said. Not unkind, precise. I held up a small envelope. Property, I said. He nodded once. I moved closer until I could see the pulse in my brother's throat. His wrists were cuffed. His jaw was set. His eyes were the color of a storm that does not want to happen. I slid the photograph out of the envelope with my thumb and kept it where he could see before I placed it in his hands. 2 kids, a rusted bicycle, summer dust, knees scabbed, faces open to the sky. You can start over, but not from here. My voice carried past the captain and landed where it needed to land. Ethan did not answer. He gripped the picture hard enough to bend it. The cuffs rattled. The corridor swallowed the sound. The MPs waited, patient, practiced. I felt anger reach for me, and I let it miss. This was not victory. This was a report finally written in the correct ink. I remembered Helmand, the teammate pressing his palm to the patch as if a hand could stop a ledger. Debt and duty, blood and breath. These are the arithmetic of our trade. I chose the same answer I have always chosen. Tell the truth. Sign the work. Accept the cost. The captain signaled the column forward. Ethan glanced at me once more, a look that mixed blame, shock, and something like recognition. He did not speak. The door latch clicked after they passed. The hallway returned to the small noises of a base that refuses to pause for drama. I stood there until the air steadied. Rains came up beside me with a paper cup of water. You did what was required, he said. Required is not the same as easy, I answered. He tilted the cup. I drank. The water tasted like metal and discipline. Whitaker joined us and gave me the boundary again. Limit contact. Let the process run. Keep your lane. I nodded. I had already stepped back inside my lane the moment the photograph left my fingers. Family can follow you into a mission. Family cannot be allowed to run it. In the bay, the M230 waited on the bench, a machine that forgives no shortcuts. I washed my hands, set my tools, and wrote a single line in the log. Evidence transferred. Maintenance resumed. Rumor still walked. Judgment still echoed. But breath by breath the work reclaimed the day. Outside, a wind rose off the flats and rattled the hangar doors. A rehearsal for the next hour I could not yet see. Stayed ready. Rumor split the base like a fault line. Chow hall chatter hardened into camps. Some officers nodded when I passed. Others turned their trays away. A crew chief touched my shoulder once and said nothing. A lieutenant I had trained stared at his coffee. The cup trembled and stilled. Nobody asked for my side because they believed they already had it. The hallway had served them headlines. Nuance rarely survives a corridor. I kept my voice for checklists and my attention for Apache 319. Metal does not care who is popular. It cares whether a pin seat's clean and a spring returns to length. I bled the air from the line. I logged the inspection. I signed my name in the same block letters I used in flight school. The habit felt like ballast. It kept the ship upright while weather tried to tilt it. 2 techs at the tool cage argued about me as if I were a component. One said guardian, one said traitor. Both fell quiet when I asked for the torque wrench they were leaning on. Their faces warmed. They stepped aside. I kept working. A grease smear on the feeder shoe looked like the river we learned to ford as kids. Survival lessons are never wasted. Pick a line, keep your feet. Do not let the current decide for you. My phone stayed face down. If OSI needed me, they would knock. I would answer, then I would return to the bench. I ate outside under the shadow of the rotor disc and listened to two crew chiefs disagree about baseball. Their ordinary argument steadied the day. Inside, a trainee misread a seal spec. I corrected him gently. He whispered thanks. An hour later, he brought me a fresh solvent bottle like penance. By late afternoon, the whiteboard had grown a new word: hero. Someone else added a question mark. Another erased both and wrote safety check due at 1600. That was the only line that mattered. When Rains walked through, he gave me the neutral nod that means I see you and the work is what counts. I returned it and kept my shoulders level. Integrity is not a speech. It is repetition under pressure. Wrench, wipe, record, repeat. At shift change, I ran my palm along the gun, as if reading heat with my skin. Everything felt cool. The machine was ready. I shut the panel, stowed the tools, and let the hangar's noise wash past without sticking. A young airman from supply hovered, then asked whether it was true that I had turned in my own brother. I met his eyes so he would not drown in gossip. I turned in a breach, I said. Families survive truth better than crashes. He blinked, then nodded, then carried a box down the hall. Night crew filtered in, day crew filtered out. The door rattled in the evening wind, and I kept the line I had chosen at breakfast, the same line I would choose at midnight. Do the work, sign the work, let the noise exhaust itself. When rumor tires, steel still asks for proof. I give it quietly, always. Whitaker called me just before noon. The blinds were half open. Sunlight cut his desk into stripes. Rains stood by the bookcase with his hands behind his back, posture routine, eyes on stakes. Whitaker did not sit. Obsidian Vector has been dismantled, but you've made enemies, Carter. He let it settle. I let my breath do the same. Not the first time, I said. He opened a folder and slid a list across. Names I knew, names I did not. Units, contractors. 2 lobbyists who had never stepped onto a flight line. He tapped one column. Some will blame you for ending their money. Some will romanticize your brother. Some will test you where cameras do not reach. I read the list, asked for guardrails, promised discipline. I will limit contact with witnesses, keep documentation immaculate, route any approach through OSI. Whitaker nodded, trust measured in paper and time. Rains added one line, careful and plain. You are not alone in this, Alyssa. He rarely used my first name on base. The choice carried weight. I know, I said, meaning it, keeping my voice level. Confidence should be quiet. Outside, heat lay on the concrete like armor. I walked the perimeter once, then returned to 319. A senior master sergeant met me at the bay door. For the crews, he said, repeating the anonymous note. For the crews, I agreed. We set to work. He checked cables while I verified tolerances. Maintenance restored order the way drill restores a formation after a stumble. Count, align, step. Competence replacing the buzz of opinion. A junior officer asked why. I answered with a data point and a checklist reference. He moved along. Facts are bridges, gossip is floodwater. Mid-afternoon, OSI sent a short update. External arrest complete. Warrants served, accounts frozen. The captain's note ended with a caution. Expect narrative warfare. Stay boring in public. I smiled at that. Boring is camouflage for people who prefer outcomes to applause. I kept my phone on silent and my badge visible. Boundaries protect as well as separate. In the break room, 2 airmen paused their card game. One stood too fast and spilled water. I handed him a towel. Kindness is also discipline. Near sunset, Whitaker crossed the hangar and stopped at my bench. Security detail is available. Use it if anything feels wrong. Understood, I said. I will escalate early, not late. He studied my face a second longer and left. Rains arrived with a sealed envelope. Inside lay an authorization expanding my access to Hawkeye logs by 1 level. If you are going to be blamed for integrity, he said, you may as well have tools that pay the bill. I signed the du-ihu receipt and tucked the paper away. The day ended the way I needed. A machine ready to fly. A record that would stand. Enemies I did not have to fear because the work could answer for me. As night colored the windows, the hangar settled into its patient rhythm. Radios murmured, metal cooled. Purpose stayed warm inside my ribs. I cleaned my bench, locked the drawer, wrote the final line in the log, then stood a moment longer and let steadiness return like tide. On purpose, again. The letter arrived folded into itself. No return address beyond the military postmark. Paper thin enough to show the press of his writing. I opened it at my bench, because the habit of not hiding follows me everywhere. 2 lines in block letters stood alone at the top. I will think about what you said. No apology, no defense, just that. I read it twice, then a third time, the way you test a connection for play. Grief and relief tugged on the same rope. Neither one, the knot held. I sat with the machine a while. Apache 319 behind me like a patient animal waiting for a hand to rest on its shoulder. The hangar smelled of solvent and dust. The evening light turned the whiteboard into a faded mirror. I thought about the bicycle in the photo, the way the chain skipped that summer until we learned rhythm. Foot, push, foot, coast. The first lesson that balance arrives after motion. Ethan had written he would think. Thinking is motion when pride would rather freeze. I honored it by doing what has always unknotted me, work. I pulled the side plate, checked the feed pawls, logged 2 tiny adjustments, signed the line. Rains found me still at the bench. I passed him the note. He read it and gave it back without comment, a courtesy that said he understood a message can be enough and still not be a cure. Will you answer? He asked. Not yet, I said. When he thinks, I will write. He nodded and set a small box on the table, a packet of patches from supply. I opened it and laughed under my breath. Wrong size, wrong unit. A human mistake among higher crimes. I fixed the order and sent a text to the clerk thanking him for the effort. Kindness kept me from turning hard where hardness would not help. At my locker, I took down the small tin that holds the old patch. Black border dulled by time. Threads pulled where sand once bit. I folded the letter into fourths and set it under the patch with the photograph. 2 kids, 1 bent wheel. A horizon wider than we could name. I closed the tin. Its click sounded like a seal seating. Not final. Secure for now. Out on the ramp, a crew ran blades. The whoop built into a steady drum. You can hear patience in that sound if you learn how to listen. I turned off my lamp, locked the drawer, wiped the bench until the cloth came up clean. On the way out, a young airman asked whether I believed people change. I said yes, and that change usually arrives as maintenance, not fireworks, tiny fixes, repeated, logged, signed, until a machine returns to safe. She smiled with her whole face and said she would write that down. I told her to live it instead. The hangar door sighed open, the desert gave me its dry kiss, and the sky held the first stars over the mountains. I carried the tin home, set it in a drawer beside my keys, and let the quiet tell me the truth. Healing is work, revenge is restraint, justice is process, and tonight my job was simple. Rest and be ready to choose the right thing again. I slept with discipline and purpose intact. Late afternoon pressed warm light against the hangar windows. Dust drifted in the sun. I was finishing the inspection on Apache 319 when Major Rains stepped in from the ramp with a small package in his hand. He moved without ceremony, boots quiet, eyes steady. I set the logbook aside and removed my gloves. The solvent sting on my skin sharpened the moment. He paused at the bench and placed the package on the clean cloth I keep for finished parts. They want you to have it, again. His voice carried the flat weight of official decisions softened by respect. I peeled the tape with my thumbnail and folded the brown paper back. Inside lay a cloth square in a clear sleeve. Black field, silver border, the icon small and unmistakable, an updated version of the informal patch the community adopted after Helmand. A quiet mark for the shot that should not have existed and yet did. I did not lift it right away. Gifts of this kind are not trinkets. They are markers. Rains leaned his hip against the bench. He did not rush the silence. Outside, a tug idled and the runway shimmered in heat. The ordinary sounds of the base kept the moment anchored. The extraordinary sat between us on cloth. What do they expect me to do with it? I asked. The question was real, not coy. Recognition can harden into theater if you are not careful. Whatever you decide, he said. Wear it, store it, burn it if that is the ritual you need. The point is that the people who understand think you paid again. I breathed once and let my shoulders ease. The second patch did not erase the first. It did not rewrite the last weeks. It did not change the arithmetic of family and duty. It simply placed a marker beside them, a small silver flag to say the work mattered and the risk was seen. Thank you, I said. He nodded as if I had accepted more than thread. He glanced at the Apache behind me, at the panels seated flush and the feeder aligned true. You staying on the bench for a while, he asked. For now, I said. This is where I do the least harm and the most good. He grinned at that. Quick, human. You do not give yourself enough credit. I give the machine the credit, I said. It tells the truth if we listen. He pushed away from the bench and left me with the light, the patch, and the steady tick of cooling metal. I cleaned the table as if preparing a field for a ceremony no one else needed to attend. Then I opened the sleeve. The fabric felt new and familiar at once, as if memory and present day had shaken hands and agreed to be civil. I set the patch on my palm and weighed what it meant, not in grams, in cost. The room breathed with me, afternoon sliding toward evening, a hinge hour where choices find their place. I reached for the tin that holds my old one, and felt gratitude open without drama, measured, true. In the small locker office, I keep a metal tin no bigger than a ration can. The lid sticks unless you ease it. I set it on the bench and laid a clean cloth, then placed the new patch beside the old patch and the Thunderbolt photo. Late sun slid through the high window and colored everything gold. Scratches on the tin looked like faint rivers. The old patch was black with a tired border, threads lifted where sand once bit. A corner stained the way years refused to forget. The new patch wore a thin silver outline, the same icon, sharper lines, a quiet reply from now to then. The photo held 8 of us, goggles raised, dust and smiles, names scrawled on the back. I stood and let the 3 items speak: memory, present duty, and the crew that taught me the cost of both. Rains had left me alone. Rituals prefer silence. I traced the edge of the old patch with my thumb. The fabric felt stubborn, worthy. I remembered sewing it on the first time, not triumph, covenant. I slid the new patch closer until silver kissed black. Not hiding, not replacing, companion. The photo stayed between them. Desert light captured in a square that still warmed my hands. I said the words out loud because saying matters. For the crews, for the truth. For those who trust a checklist written by strangers who wanted them alive. I turned the old patch over, peeled away a scrap of backing from a field repair, watched one stray thread settle and lie still. Evening thickened. The gold softened. The room took on the quiet of a chapel before a prayer. I slid the photo into the tin first. Faces under metal. Laughter sealed without being silenced. I laid the old patch on top. The weight small, the meaning not. I did not close the lid yet. I let the new patch rest on the cloth, its silver edge catching light that dwindled but would not quit. Ethan's letter sat in my pocket. 2 careful lines that promised thought instead of noise. Thinking is maintenance, slow, logged, repeated. I pictured the kid who asked whether people change and decided to keep answering yes with my hands, not speeches. The M230 behind me offered its lesson again. The truth of torque and tolerance, the mercy of work done right. Gifts are not absolution, they are assignments, reminders to stay precise when attention wanders. I pressed my palm to the tin. Cool metal steadied the heat under my ribs. The lid clicked, not final, secure. I unwrapped the new patch and let it sit in the last stripe of sun. A small flag for duty accepted. A blade spooled up outside. The hangar air shivered. The sound braided with the memory of 8 voices calling checks in the photo. I matched its rhythm with my breathing, allowed gratitude the size of a steady pulse. Nothing theatrical, completely real. Wind lifted dust beyond the window and set it down again. The hour asked for decision and received it. I picked up the new patch and felt its weight, light yet exact. A tool for the spine, a promise to keep paying attention. The first rotor thumped to life outside. A single blade found its rhythm. Then the rest joined and the sound turned whole. I slipped the new patch into my palm and walked back through the hallway to the hangar floor. Night crews rolled tool chests toward 319. The ordinary kept doing its job. I stopped at my locker, opened the door, and took down my flight suit. The fabric carried the clean scent of detergent and a memory of dust you never fully wash away. I set the suit on the bench, smoothed the left chest, and took one measured breath. I did not feel triumph. I felt alignment, a sight settling when wind drops. I pinned the patch where the old one had lived, needle through, needle back. A tidy seam that would hold under heat and motion. I checked the corners, pressed each stitch, listened to blades deepen on the ramp. A crew chief walked by, nodded once, and kept moving. I zipped the suit, felt the familiar give across the shoulders. I looked at myself only long enough to confirm placement, then pulled my sleeve down over the patch. No display, no announcement, just a small square of fabric doing quiet work near a steady heart. I returned to the bench and ran my hands over the M230 one more time. Touch verifies what eyes claim. The chain sat true, the feeder aligned. The log matched what my hands felt. Rains appeared at the bay door and nodded toward the flight line. A question without pressure. "Not tonight," I said. He accepted it and blended into the movement of crews and carts. "I will fly again when the work demands it, not to chase a stage." The patch under my sleeve was enough. A promise carried, not flaunted. I clipped my badge, tied my boots, and felt the clean click of purpose settling into place. A radio call cracked across the hangar. A launch window shifted. People adjusted. Nobody panicked. Good teams move like that. Small corrections. Shared timing. I stood at the edge of the bay and watched 319 under the lights. A predator at rest. I thought of Ethan in a barracks 2 towns away. His letter folded in a tin with our photo and the old patch. A slow engine turning over in his chest. When he is ready to choose, he will know where to find solid ground. Here, with truth and work that holds. The rotors reached their cruise rhythm. The air vibrated against my ribs. I pressed my sleeve once as if checking a bandage, then smiled. I do not need anyone to see it. I need to be ready when the next hard choice arrives. Readiness is posture, not pose. When the time comes to squeeze again, I will, cleanly, without noise, the way a mechanic answers a question with a torque wrench and a signature. I went back to the maintenance room. The M230 for Apache 319 lay where I had left it, open, honest. The bench lamp cast a white circle across steel. Solvent lifted the day from my gloves. The checklist waited. I set the logbook to today's page, lined up brushes and swabs, then began where I always begin. Small to large, simple to complex. Motion before meaning. Every eye that passed the doorway felt different. Not louder, not braver, simply more focused. Respect behaving like gravity. A trainee paused and asked for torque values again. I gave them with the same calm I would give a heading on the radio. Numbers are kindness when nerves run fast. The chain links clicked as I set them into a shallow tray. I dipped the brush, drew clean paths through carbon. Watched the metal return to its own color. Work carries a sound that steadies the chest. Clean strokes, parts laid in rows. I could feel the new patch under my sleeve like a taught lesson, present, not performative. It did not pull my shoulder back or bow my head. It simply reminded my hands why they do not hurry. A crew chief leaned in. He did not mention rumor or arrests. He only said the next sortie moved to first light and asked whether 319 would be ready. Yes, on time, within spec. He nodded and left with the relief of a man crossing a bridge he did not have to inspect. Between tasks, I wiped the receiver tracks until the cloth came up clean. The third pass is where patience pays its quiet dividend. The hangar carried on. Radios murmured, a rolling ladder squeaked. Someone laughed and then softened it. When people looked at me, they did not linger. They picked up a tool and matched the room. I prefer that version of attention. Useful, moving. I thought of the first week I arrived with a contractor badge and a toolbox bought with my own paycheck. How invisibility felt like shelter. how silence felt like armor. Neither is bad, neither is enough. Integrity wants action, and action wants documentation. I signed the mid-inspection block, checked the feeder tension, set the springs to the numbers that keep pilots alive. By the time night settled, the gun had shed the film of the day and gained the readiness of tomorrow. I closed the panel, set my palm against the cool housing, listened for anything my eyes had missed. The room gave me the hum of the lamp and the faint thud of rotors far out on the ramp. I shut off the light. Squares from the high windows turned dark. The metal kept its promise to wait. Nothing fundamental had changed. The work still asked for the same patience, the same precision, the same honest pressure. What changed gathered near the doorway, not ceremony, expectation. I clipped my badge, stepped into the corridor with the steady breath I trust when days run hard. Behind me, the M230 rested. Ahead, the bass returned to its rhythm. Within me, the line I carry stayed unbroken. Do the work, sign the work, let it stand. Steadily, Whitaker came through the hangar as dusk cooled the floor. He did not call my name. He simply stopped at the edge of my bench and gave a single nod. I answered with the same small motion. Acknowledgement without theater. Respect rarely needs volume. Rains stood a few paces back, hands behind his back, eyes on the flight line. Whitaker glanced at the closed panel on 319, then at the logbook, then at my sleeves. He was reading my tempo. People reveal themselves in how they finish a day. Nothing to add, Colonel. 319 is green for first light. He returned a short breath that counted as approval and let silence carry the moment. He spoke quietly, the tone leaders use when meaning must travel farther than the words. Your lane is clear, Carter. OSI will handle the rest. Keep your documentation exact. Call early if shadows move. I said understood, then added a line. I will run a second pass on Hawkeye interfaces before launch. No changes will move without 2 signatures. He nodded. Alignment. Rain stepped closer and placed a small wrapped sandwich on the bench. He said you should eat. Fuel and judgment should both stay steady. I smiled once and said yes. This is not a fast story. A junior officer approached, hesitated, then saluted. His right hand shook a little. He thanked me for training notes I had written weeks ago. I told him to trust checklists, and people in that order. Checklists rarely lie. He left looking taller. Whitaker looked down the length of the hangar. Crews moved with the unison of practiced trust. Carts rolled. Radios murmured. The bass breathed in patterns we build on purpose. He gave the smallest nod again, then turned away, business elsewhere, confidence left behind. After he went, the supervision chatter rose, a low hum that says a room keeps faith with itself. I put on clean gloves and ran a fingertip along the seam where the panel sits. Flush, secure. I wrote a final note in the log. Secondary verification complete. Ready by 0500. Rains and I walked to the door to watch the sky trade orange for blue. The mountains cut a sharp line. A single star showed. He said tomorrow will be a normal day, and if not, we will make it look like one. I said that is our craft. He asked whether the weight had shifted. I told him weight does not leave. It redistributes. You learn to carry it without dropping the things that matter. He accepted that answer and did not try to ease it. On my way back to the bench, 2 techs cleared the aisle without being asked, then set their tools straight. I took the sandwich, wrote down the time I stopped, and noted the day had ended without a flare. Outside, a breeze slipped under the hangar doors and carried the smell of dust and jet fuel. Familiar, clean, real. The kind of air that tells a crew the night will be steady, and the work will meet the morning ready. The nod Whitaker gave still warmed the air. Not praise, permission to remain exactly who I have been all along. I locked the tool drawer and stood with my hand on the bench, the M230 for 319 ready. The room quiet, the line inside me steady. I thought about Ethan, about the people we lost, about the new patch resting under my sleeve. I am not only the gun cleaner, I am the person who knows when to keep silence and when to speak, when to hold and when to act, when to sign a line and when to refuse one. That is the craft I am keeping. Justice moved from rumor to record by patience and process. not by spectacle. My brother sent a letter instead of a speech. He chose to think. A door cracked open, not absolution, not exile. I set that truth beside the Thunderbolt photo and let both rest without argument. Outside, rotors whispered across the ramp. Crews checked straps. A dog barked once. The desert returned to stillness. I shrugged into my jacket and felt the patch press lightly against my chest. Not a crown, a compass. The night kept faith with the day. The work continues. Before we say goodbye, we would love to know where you are watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Tell us in the comments. We read every note with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not only to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending time with us today. Wherever you are, carry this story with you. Remember this simple truth. Sometimes the miracle does not knock on the door. It waits quietly until you choose to open your heart. Take care. We will see you in the next story. I clicked the light off and stepped into the corridor. The floor cool under my boots, the air clean in my lungs. I am not trying to be larger than the room. I am trying to be exact within it. When the next hard choice arrives, I will be ready. I will measure twice, decide once, and let action speak. Tomorrow the patch will still ride under my sleeve. The log will still ask for a signature. The machine will still tell the truth if I listen. That is enough. That is the work. That is how lives are kept and future harm prevented. I walked into the night with the steady pace of a person who knows the difference between noise and signal, between pride and purpose, between revenge and repair. I will keep listening to the signals that matter. I will keep teaching the young to trust their hands and checklists. Call me the gun cleaner if you like. The name fits and does not. I know who I am. I am Alyssa Carter. I will choose discipline over drama, mercy over theater. And when it is time to squeeze, I will do it cleanly. For the crews, for the truth, for the ones who never got to send a letter home.